Hello, and welcome back to Minute Mysteries, where we post short crime and mystery stories read aloud by professionals every day. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe to help support our channel. Today, tune in for our best story yet, The Vanishing Act. Detective Sarah Chen had seen her share of impossible crimes in her 15 years with the NYPD. But the Blackwood Theater case would prove to be the most baffling yet. It began on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening in October, when she received a call that would consume the next week of her life. Detective Chen? This is Captain Morrison. We've got a situation at the Blackwood Theater on 47th Street. High-profile case. The victim is Marcus Blackwood, the theater owner. Famous magician, apparently. The circumstances are unusual. Sarah pulled on her coat and grabbed her keys. The rain was coming down in sheets as she navigated the congested streets of Manhattan. The Blackwood Theater was a modest venue wedged between a deli and a dry cleaner, its Art Deco facade a remnant of Broadway's golden age. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights reflecting off the wet asphalt like watercolors bleeding together. Officer Rodriguez met her at the entrance. Victim's name is Marcus Blackwood, 62 years old. He was performing his signature trick, the vanishing cabinet, when something went wrong. Very wrong. Sarah stepped inside the theater and immediately noticed the intimate setting. Only about 200 seats, maybe less. The stage was modest but well appointed, dominated by an ornate wooden cabinet that stood center stage like a monolith. Crime scene techs were already at work, photographing everything from multiple angles. What exactly happened? Sarah asked, pulling out her notebook. Rodriguez consulted his notes. According to witnesses, Blackwood entered the cabinet as part of his act. His assistant, a woman named Elena Vasquez, closed the doors and performed the usual magic routine, spinning the cabinet, saying the magic words, that sort of thing. But when she opened the doors, he shrugged. Empty. Completely empty. That's the point of the trick, isn't it? Usually, yeah. But Blackwood was supposed to reappear from the back of the theater. Instead, the audience waited and waited. Vasquez seemed genuinely confused, kept calling for him. Eventually, she opened the cabinet again, and that's when they found the blood. Sarah approached the cabinet, noting the intricate carvings along its sides, mythical creatures and arcane symbols that seemed to writhe in the stage lights. The interior was lined with black velvet, now stained with dark patches, that the crime scene photographer was documenting with methodical precision. How much blood are we talking about? Sarah asked. Enough to indicate serious trauma. Not enough to suggest he died in there, Rodriguez replied. And here's the weird part. The cabinet has been examined by our people. No false bottoms, no hidden panels, no trapdoors. It's exactly what it appears to be. A wooden box with 2 doors. Sarah studied the cabinet more closely. It stood approximately 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, easily large enough to accommodate a man of Blackwood's stature. She had seen similar contraptions in magic shows, though she'd never given much thought to how they worked. Who discovered the blood? Elena Vasquez, the assistant. She's pretty shaken up. Kept insisting something went wrong with the trick, that this had never happened before. Where is she now? Interview room at the precinct. Captain thought you'd want to talk to her first. Sarah nodded, taking one last look around the theater. The audience had been evacuated hours ago, but she could still sense their presence, the lingering energy of confusion and fear. Programs lay scattered on the floor, and someone had left a half-empty box of chocolates on one of the seats. any security cameras?" she asked. "That's the thing," Rodriguez said, consulting his notes again. "The theater has cameras, but they malfunctioned during the performance. Started recording static right around the time Blackwood entered the cabinet. Convenient. That's what I thought." Sarah made additional notes as she walked through the theater, examining the sight lines from different seats. From anywhere in the audience, the cabinet would have been clearly visible. If Blackwood had somehow exited through the back or sides, someone would have seen him. At the precinct, Elena Vasquez was waiting in interview room 2. She was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and red-rimmed eyes that suggested she'd been crying. She wore a sequined stage costume that looked incongruous under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Ms. Vasquez, I'm Detective Chen. I understand you were Mr. Blackwood's assistant?" Elena nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "For 3 years now. Marcus he was like a father to me. I can't believe he's gone." "We haven't confirmed that he's deceased," Sarah said gently. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened tonight?" Elena took a shaky breath. It was supposed to be routine. Marcus had performed the vanishing cabinet thousands of times. He enters the cabinet, I close the doors, spin it around, say the incantation, then open the doors to show he's gone. The audience always gasps. It's his signature trick. Then he's supposed to reappear from the back of the theater, usually with some kind of flourish. But tonight he never reappeared. I waited, thinking maybe he was drawing out the suspense, but the audience started getting restless. I called for him, but there was no response. That's when I opened the cabinet again and saw. She shuddered. The blood. Sarah made notes, studying Elena's face for any tells. "How exactly does the trick work?" "I don't know." The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. "Ms. Vasquez, your employer has apparently vanished, possibly been harmed. If you know how the trick works, it could help us find him." Elena shifted uncomfortably. Marcus was very secretive about his methods. He said a magician's secrets die with him. I only know my part, the presentation. I never knew the mechanism. Sarah leaned forward. In 3 years of working together, he never explained it. Never let anything slip. Never. Marcus was old school that way. He believed magic should remain magical. Sarah studied Elena's face. There was something she wasn't saying, but pushing too hard too early might cause her to shut down completely. "Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Blackwood. Was it strictly professional?" "Completely professional. Marcus was a gentleman, always respectful. He paid me well, taught me about stagecraft, treated me like family." Elena's voice cracked slightly. He had no family of his own. His wife died 5 years ago, no children. The theater was his whole world. "Any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt him?" Elena hesitated. There was some tension with other performers, I suppose. Competition for bookings, that sort of thing. But nothing that would lead to this. "Anyone specific?" Victor Hawthorne performed at the theater next door. He and Marcus had a falling out years ago, something about stolen tricks. But Victor's in his 70s. I can't imagine him doing anything violent. Sarah made a note to follow up on Hawthorne. "What about financially? Was the theater successful?" It was struggling, Elena admitted. Attendance had been declining. Marcus was worried about making rent. He'd been talking about maybe selling some of his equipment, retiring. Any recent unusual incidents? Strange phone calls? People hanging around the theater? Elena frowned, thinking. There was a man who came by last week. Well-dressed, European accent maybe. He said he was interested in buying some of Marcus's illusions. Marcus seemed nervous after talking to him. Did you catch his name? No, but I heard him mention something about a collection. He said he represented private collectors who appreciated authentic magical apparatus. Sarah made detailed notes. The mysterious collector angle was worth investigating. One more thing, Sarah said. The security cameras malfunctioned during the performance. Any idea why that might have happened? Elena looked genuinely surprised. They malfunctioned. That's strange. Marcus just had them serviced last month. He was paranoid about people recording his shows, figuring out his secrets. After the interview, Sarah drove back to the theater. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed under the streetlights. She wanted another look at the cabinet, this time without the crowd of crime scene techs. The theater was dark except for the ghost light. A single bulb left burning center stage, a theatrical tradition. Sarah used her flashlight to examine the cabinet more closely. The wood was old, but well-maintained, with intricate joints that spoke of skilled craftsmanship. She ran her hands along the interior walls, feeling for any irregularities. Nothing. The cabinet was exactly what it appeared to be, a box with 2 doors. She stepped inside and closed the doors, experiencing the complete darkness that Marcus Blackwood had entered hours earlier. The space felt confining, but not impossibly small. She examined the ceiling, the floor, even the door hinges, but found nothing unusual. Opening the doors, she stepped out and noticed something she had missed earlier. On the stage floor, just to the left of the cabinet, was a small piece of fabric. She bagged it carefully. It looked like it might be from a stage costume, deep blue silk with gold threading. Her phone rang. Chen. Detective, this is Officer Park from the precinct. We just got a call about Marcus Blackwood. Someone spotted him at Grand Central, boarding the midnight train to Boston. Sarah checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. You sure it was him? Witness seemed certain, said he recognized him from newspaper photos. Blackwood was moving quickly, seemed agitated. Any way to confirm? Transit police are checking the cameras now. I'll call you when we know more. Sarah hung up, puzzled. If Marcus Blackwood was alive and boarding trains, where had all that blood come from? And why the elaborate disappearing act? She decided to visit the theater next door, where Victor Hawthorne presumably performed. The Mystic Palace was smaller than the Blackwood Theater, but more ornate, with posters advertising an evening of impossible wonders starring the amazing Hawthorne. Sarah tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, she called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" "Back here," came a gravelly voice from the direction of the stage. She found Victor Hawthorne sitting on a chair center stage, polishing what appeared to be a crystal ball. He was indeed elderly, with wild white hair and keen blue eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Despite the late hour, he was fully dressed in an old-fashioned 3-piece suit. Detective Chen, NYPD. I understand you knew Marcus Blackwood? Hawthorne continued polishing the crystal ball. Knew him. That's putting it mildly. We were partners once, many years ago, before he decided my ideas weren't good enough for his precious theater. Tell me about that. Ancient history, Detective. Two old fools arguing over who invented what trick. The kind of pettiness that seems important at the time, but ridiculous in hindsight. Not so ridiculous that it couldn't lead to violence. Hawthorne laughed, a dry sound like autumn leaves. Violence? Detective, I'm 73 years old and can barely lift this crystal ball. If I wanted to harm Marcus, I'd have to use magic. And despite appearances, I'm not actually capable of real magic. Sarah studied the old man. His alibi would be easy to check, and he seemed genuinely amused by the suggestion that he might be dangerous. Where were you tonight between 8 and 10 p.m.? Right here, performing for an audience of 12 people. Not exactly a sold-out show, but they seemed entertained. I can give you their names if you'd like. That would be helpful. What can you tell me about Blackwood's vanishing cabinet trick? Hawthorne's expression grew serious. Ah, the cabinet. That was always Marcus's masterpiece. He bought it from an estate sale years ago, claimed it was built by some famous Victorian magician. Truth is, I don't think even Marcus fully understood how it worked. What do you mean? The trick was too perfect, Detective. Most vanishing cabinets rely on mirrors, false panels, or trap doors. But Marcus's cabinet, I examined it once, years ago when we were still speaking. It's exactly what it appears to be, a simple wooden box. And yet, people vanish from it completely. Sarah felt a chill. People? Plural? Oh yes. Marcus didn't just use it for his standard act. He would sometimes bring volunteers from the audience. They would enter the cabinet and vanish completely, then reappear from impossible locations. The balcony, the lobby, once even from outside on the street. It was genuinely inexplicable. Did anyone ever not reappear? Hawthorne paused in his polishing. There was one incident, about 2 years ago. A young man volunteered from the audience, entered the cabinet, doors closed, the usual routine. But when Marcus opened the doors, the man was gone. They waited, searched the theater, but he never reappeared. What happened to him? Nobody knows. Marcus claimed the man must have snuck out during the confusion, but... Hawthorne shook his head. I saw the man enter the cabinet myself. There was no way he could have left without being seen. Sarah made careful notes. Did anyone report this to the police? The man had given a false name, paid cash for his ticket. No way to trace him. Marcus was shaken by it, though. He stopped using volunteers after that, only performed the trick himself. Until tonight. Until tonight. Hawthorne agreed. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. The transit police had checked the Grand Central cameras. No sign of Marcus Blackwood. The witness had been mistaken. She left Hawthorne with instructions to stay available and drove back to the precinct to check on any new developments. The night desk sergeant flagged her down. Detective Chen, we got a weird one. Woman called about an hour ago. Said she saw Marcus Blackwood in Central Park, near the reservoir. Seemed agitated, talking to himself. Same witness who called about Grand Central? No, different person entirely. Transit cops are saying their witness was probably mistaken. They couldn't find Blackwood on any cameras. Sarah rubbed her temples. Multiple sightings of a man who had seemingly vanished from a locked box, leaving only blood behind. Either Marcus Blackwood was alive and orchestrating an elaborate hoax, or someone was playing games with the investigation. She decided to visit Central Park. Though the chances of finding anything useful in the dark were slim, the reservoir area was quiet, except for the occasional jogger and the distant hum of traffic. She walked the path that circled the water, using her flashlight to scan the ground for any signs of recent disturbance. Near a bench overlooking the water, she found something interesting. A program from the Blackwood Theater, dated for tonight's performance. It was wet from the rain, but still legible. Someone had circled Marcus Blackwood's name in red ink. As she bagged the evidence, her phone rang. Detective Chen. This is Dr. Martinez at the lab. I've got preliminary results on that blood from the theater. Go ahead. It's definitely human blood. Type O negative. But here's the interesting part. It's old. At least several days old, maybe more. Someone stored it and then used it to stage the scene. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle shifting. You're sure? Certain. Fresh blood has a different cellular structure. This blood was refrigerated or frozen, then thawed. And there's something else. We found traces of anticoagulant, the kind used in blood banks. So, someone used stored blood to fake Blackwood's death. Or disappearance, yeah. Whoever did this wanted it to look like he was injured in that cabinet. Sarah thanked the doctor and hung up, her mind racing. If the blood was planted, then Marcus Blackwood's disappearance was definitely staged. But was he the victim of an elaborate kidnapping? Or was he orchestrating his own vanishing act? She drove back to the theater district, deciding to canvass the area for any businesses that might have security cameras with a view of the theater. A 24-hour diner across the street had a camera pointed toward the sidewalk, and after some persuasion, the manager agreed to let her review the footage. The camera quality was poor, but she could make out the front entrance of the Blackwood Theater. She fast-forwarded through the hours before the performance, watching people arrive for the show. At 7:15 p.m., she spotted something interesting. A figure in dark clothing approached the theater's side entrance, the one that led directly backstage. The person used a key to enter. The timestamp was 45 minutes before the performance began. Sarah rewound and watched the sequence again, but the figure was too indistinct to identify. However, their movement suggested familiarity with the theater. They went directly to the door and entered quickly, like someone who belonged there. She made a note to check who had keys to the theater, besides Marcus Blackwood himself. The next morning, Sarah returned to interview Elena Vasquez again. She found the woman at her apartment in Queens, a modest one-bedroom with posters from various magic shows covering the walls. Ms. Vasquez, I need to ask you about keys to the theater. Who besides Mr. Blackwood had access? Elena poured coffee with shaking hands. Just Marcus and me, as far as I know. And maybe the cleaning lady, Mrs. Chen, no relation, I assume? Different Chen. Anyone else? Victor Hawthorne might still have a key from the old days, but I doubt Marcus would have let him keep it after their falling out. Sarah showed Elena a still frame from the security video. Do you recognize this person? Elena studied the blurry image. It's hard to tell. The build looks familiar, but it could be anyone. Could it be you? Elena's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. Me? Detective, I was at the theater preparing for the show. I arrived at 6:30 and never left until after it happened. Can anyone verify that? The janitor was there when I arrived, and some of the early audience members saw me checking the lighting before the show started. Sarah made notes. but something in Elena's manners suggested she was holding back information. "Elena, I need you to be completely honest with me. Was there anything unusual about last night's performance? Any changes to the routine? Any problems with the equipment?" Elena hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. There was one thing. Marcus seemed nervous before the show, more than usual. He kept checking the cabinet, examining it, like he was looking for something. Looking for what? I don't know. But he mentioned something about the cabinet being modified recently. He seemed worried about it. This was new information. Modified how? He didn't say. But a few weeks ago he had some work done on it. Said he was having it restored by a specialist. Do you know who did the work? No. But Marcus was very secretive about it. He had the cabinet removed from the theater for almost a week. When it came back, it looked exactly the same. But Marcus kept saying it was different now. Sarah felt a surge of excitement. Someone had modified the cabinet, and shortly afterward, Marcus Blackwood had vanished from it, leaving only planted blood behind. The connection was too significant to ignore. I need you to think carefully. Did Marcus mention anything about selling the theater? Any financial pressures that might have forced him to do something desperate? Elena nodded reluctantly. He was in debt, Detective. More than he let on publicly. The theater was losing money, and he'd taken out loans to keep it running. Last month, he got a notice that the building was going into foreclosure. How much debt are we talking about? Hundreds of thousands, maybe more. Marcus was proud. He didn't like talking about money problems. But I could see how stressed he was. Sarah left Elena's apartment with a clearer picture of Marcus Blackwood's situation. A man in severe debt, with a cabinet that had been mysteriously modified, who then vanished during his signature trick, leaving only planted blood behind. Either someone had kidnapped him as part of an elaborate scheme, or Marcus Blackwood had staged his own disappearance. She decided to track down whoever had worked on the cabinet. A few phone calls to theatrical prop specialists in the city yielded a promising lead. Meridian Theatrical Restorations, specialists in antique stage equipment. The shop was located in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, filled with the skeletal remains of magic shows past. Sarah found the proprietor, James Meridian, in his workshop, carefully restoring an ornate Egyptian sarcophagus. Detective Chen, NYPD. I understand you recently worked on a cabinet for Marcus Blackwood? Meridian was a thin man in his 50s, with intricate tattoos covering both arms. Images of mechanical gears and mystical symbols intertwined. He set down his tools and studied her carefully. The Vanishing Cabinet, yes. Beautiful piece, late Victorian craftsmanship. What's this about? Mr. Blackwood disappeared last night during a performance. We're trying to understand what modifications were made to the cabinet. Meridian's expression grew troubled. Disappeared. That's not supposed to happen. What do you mean? The work I did was supposed to make the cabinet safer, not more dangerous. Marcus was concerned about the mechanism, said it was too unpredictable. Sarah pulled out her notebook. What kind of mechanism? Meridian hesitated, clearly torn between professional confidentiality and genuine concern. Detective, what I'm about to tell you might sound impossible, but I've been working with theatrical equipment for 30 years, and I've learned not to dismiss anything outright. Go ahead. The cabinet is genuinely supernatural. I know how that sounds. But I've examined every inch of it. There are no hidden panels, no trapdoors, no mirrors. When someone enters that cabinet and the doors are closed, they actually vanish from our reality temporarily. Sarah stared at him. You're saying it's actually magic? I'm saying it operates on principles I don't understand. The Victorian magician who built it, Theodore Grimm, was known for incorporating actual occult practices into his stage work. Most of his equipment was destroyed after his death, but a few pieces survived. And you modified this cabinet how? I installed a fail-safe mechanism. Grimm's original design was unstable. Sometimes people who entered the cabinet would vanish permanently. There were documented cases of assistants who never reappeared. Marcus was terrified of that happening. So what did you do? I created what I called an anchor system. Essentially, it ensures that anyone who enters the cabinet remains tethered to our reality and will automatically return after a predetermined time, even if the magician can't complete the recall process. Sarah felt a chill. How long is the predetermined time? 72 hours. After that, the anchor activates and pulls the person back. And if someone tried to override the system? Theoretically impossible. The anchor operates on a mechanical timer, completely separate from the cabinet's supernatural properties. Unless ... Meridian paused, looking troubled. Unless what? Unless someone knew exactly how to disable it. But that would require detailed knowledge of both my modifications and the cabinet's original supernatural properties. Very few people would have that information. Who would know? Myself, Marcus, and... Meridian hesitated. The person who commissioned the work. Sarah looked up from her notes. What do you mean, commissioned? Marcus Blackwood hired you to do the work, didn't he? Not exactly. The work was paid for by a third party. Someone who claimed to be an insurance company representing Mr. Blackwood. They provided very specific instructions about what modifications to make. Do you have records of this third party? I should have everything in my files. Let me check. Meridian disappeared into a cluttered office and returned with a folder. Here we are. The work was commissioned by Eternal Assurance Company, represented by a man named... He squinted at his own handwriting. David Sterling, European accent, very knowledgeable about antique stage equipment. Sarah felt of pieces clicking together. Elena had mentioned a well-dressed European man who had visited the theater asking about buying Marcus's equipment. Do you have contact information for this David Sterling? Just a phone number. But when I tried to call with questions about the work, it was disconnected. Sarah copied down all the information from Meridian's files. Did you ever meet this Sterling in person? Once, when he came to inspect the work. Unusual fellow, seemed to know more about the cabinet than I did. He asked very specific questions about Grimm's original design, things that wouldn't be in any published accounts. What kind of questions? Technical details about the supernatural mechanism, how the vanishing process worked, what happened to people while they were elsewhere. He seemed particularly interested in whether someone could be made to vanish permanently. Sarah felt a cold certainty settling in her chest. Mr. Meridian, is it possible that someone with knowledge of your modifications could sabotage the anchor system? With the right tools and expertise, yes. But they'd have to access the cabinet beforehand, and they'd need to understand both the supernatural and mechanical components. Sarah thanked Meridian and left with copies of his files. The case was becoming clearer, though no less bizarre. Someone calling himself David Sterling had commissioned modifications to the cabinet under false pretenses, then apparently used that knowledge to sabotage the safety system and make Marcus Blackwood vanish permanently. But who was David Sterling, and what was his motive? She decided to dig deeper into the mysterious European collector. Back at the precinct, she ran searches on David Sterling and Eternal Assurance Company. The company didn't exist, and David Sterling was too common a name to yield useful results without additional information. However, a search for Theodore Grimm, the Victorian magician who had built the cabinet, produced some interesting results. Grimm had died under mysterious circumstances in 1894, and several of his assistants had vanished during performances and never been seen again. Most of his equipment had been destroyed by his estate, concerned about its dangerous properties. But according to one historical account, a collector named Sterling had acquired some of Grimm's remaining pieces in the early 1900s. The Sterling family had been known for collecting occult artifacts and had supposedly amassed one of the world's largest collections of supernatural objects. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her research. "Detective Chen, this is Officer Martinez. We just got another sighting of Marcus Blackwood, this time in Times Square. Multiple witnesses this time. Seems more credible." "On my way." Times Square was its usual chaos of tourists, street performers, and flashing lights. Sarah found the witnesses at the NYPD substation, a family from Ohio who had attended Blackwood's show the night before. "We recognized him immediately," the father said. "He looked exactly the same as last night, same clothes and everything. But he seemed confused, disoriented." "Where exactly did you see him?" "Near the red steps, around noon. He was just standing there, staring at the crowd like he'd never seen anything like it before." "Did you approach him?" "My wife tried to, but he walked away quickly, disappeared into the crowd." Sarah took detailed statements and checked with nearby businesses for security footage. One electronics store had a camera that covered the red steps, and Sarah was able to identify a figure that could be Marcus Blackwood, though the image quality made positive identification difficult. The timestamp showed 12:17 p.m., almost exactly 16 hours after Blackwood had entered the cabinet. If the witness sightings were accurate, Marcus Blackwood was alive, but apparently in some kind of altered state. But according to Meridian, the anchor system should have returned him to the cabinet, not dropped him randomly in Times Square. Unless someone had indeed sabotaged the system. Sarah returned to the theater to examine the cabinet again, this time with Meridian's technical information in mind. She brought along Detective Martinez, a colleague with experience in technical crimes. According to the restoration specialist, there should be a mechanical timer system installed somewhere in the cabinet's base, Sarah explained as they examined the ornate box. Martinez ran his hands along the bottom edges of the cabinet. "Here, feel this. There's a slight difference in the wood grain." Sarah knelt down and examined the area Martinez had identified. What she had initially taken for decorative carving was actually a concealed panel. With some careful manipulation, it opened to reveal a complex mechanical device, gears, springs, and what appeared to be a clockwork timer. "Looks like someone's been here before us," Martinez observed. Several of the gears were bent, and the main spring had been deliberately severed. The sabotage was crude but effective. The anchor system had been completely disabled. When was this done? Sarah wondered aloud. Hard to say. but the metal shavings on the floor suggest it was recent. Maybe yesterday, before the performance. Sarah photographed everything and called for a full forensics team to process the cabinet. Someone had definitely sabotaged the safety system, but the timing suggested it was done specifically to ensure Marcus Blackwood would vanish permanently during the performance. Her phone buzzed with another text message. Transit police had spotted someone matching Blackwood's description at Grand Central again, this time caught on camera boarding a train to Philadelphia. Sarah felt frustration mounting. If Blackwood was alive and traveling around, why hadn't he contacted anyone? And how was he getting money to buy train tickets? She decided to visit Elena Vasquez again. Something about the assistant's story wasn't adding up, and Sarah suspected she knew more about the cabinet's modifications than she had admitted. She found Elena at the theater, cleaning up after the previous night's chaos. The young woman looked exhausted, her stage makeup smeared and her sequined costume replaced by jeans and a sweater. "Elena, I need to ask you about David Sterling." Elena froze, her hand tightening on the mop handle. "I don't know anyone by that name." "He's the man who commissioned the modifications to the cabinet. European accent, well-dressed, interested in Marcus's collection. Sound familiar?" "I told you. A man came by asking about buying equipment, but I never got his name." Sarah studied Elena's face. The woman was lying. But why? "Elena, we found evidence that the cabinet's safety system was sabotaged. Someone with knowledge of the modifications disabled it deliberately. Marcus didn't just disappear. Someone made sure he would vanish permanently." Elena's facade cracked. "You don't understand. Marcus wasn't the victim. He was the perpetrator." The admission hung in the air between them. "What do you mean?" Elena set down the mop and sank into one of the theater seats. "Marcus was broke, Detective. Completely broke. The theater was going into foreclosure, and he owed money to some very dangerous people. He was desperate." "So he faked his own disappearance?" "Not faked. He actually vanished, but it was supposed to be temporary. The plan was to disappear for a few days, let everyone think he was dead, then reappear somewhere else with a new identity." "And the blood?" "Marcus donated his own blood over several weeks, stored it in a refrigerator in the basement. He planted it in the cabinet before the performance to make it look like he'd been injured or killed." Sarah felt pieces falling into place, but something still didn't make sense. If it was supposed to be temporary, why sabotage the anchor system? Elena looked confused. "Sabotage? What are you talking about? The anchor system was supposed to bring him back after 72 hours. That was the whole plan. Someone disabled it. The system was deliberately broken before the performance." Elena went pale. "That's impossible. Marcus checked it himself before the show. He was terrified of vanishing permanently. That's why he had the anchor system installed in the first place." Sarah realized they were dealing with a more complex situation than either fraud or kidnapping. Someone else had been manipulating events from the beginning. "Tell me about David Sterling. And don't lie this time. Marcus's life may depend on it." Elena took a shaky breath. "David Sterling contacted Marcus about 6 months ago. Said he represented a collector interested in Theodore Grimm's work. He offered to buy the cabinet for an enormous sum, but Marcus refused to sell." "What changed his mind about the modifications?" "Sterling convinced him the cabinet was dangerous in its original state. He provided historical documentation about assistants who had vanished permanently, offered to pay for modifications that would make it safer. Marcus was intrigued by the safety aspect, but also by Sterling's knowledge of the cabinet's history. Did Marcus suspect Sterling had ulterior motives? Not at first. But in the past few weeks, Marcus became paranoid. He said Sterling knew too much, that he was asking questions about how to override the safety system. Marcus started to think Sterling was planning something. Like what? Marcus thought Sterling wanted to steal the cabinet, but needed to understand its supernatural properties first. He was afraid Sterling might try to sabotage a performance to discredit him, then buy the cabinet cheap when Marcus was financially ruined. Sarah realized Marcus Blackwood had been partially right about Sterling's intentions, but had underestimated the scope of the plot. Elena, I think David Sterling wanted more than just the cabinet. I think he wanted Marcus to vanish permanently, and he's been manipulating events to make that happen. Elena stared at her. But why? What would be the point? I'm not sure yet, but I intend to find out. Sarah left the theater with a new understanding of the case. David Sterling wasn't just a collector. He was orchestrating an elaborate plot that had culminated in Marcus Blackwood's permanent disappearance. But Sterling's ultimate motive remained unclear. She decided to research the Sterling family's collection more thoroughly. At the main branch of the New York Public Library, she found several books about Victorian-era occult collectors. The Sterling family had indeed been prominent in that world, acquiring artifacts from across Europe and America. According to one source, the family had been obsessed with Theodore Grimm's work specifically, believing his equipment could provide access to other dimensions or states of existence. Several members of the Sterling family had died under mysterious circumstances while experimenting with Grimm's devices. The current head of the family, according to the most recent information Sarah could find, was David Sterling III, great-grandson of the original collector. He had inherited not only the family fortune, but also their obsession with supernatural artifacts. More disturbing, Sarah found a recent article from a London newspaper about Sterling's acquisition of a complete set of Grimm's equipment from a private estate. According to the article, Sterling believed Grimm had discovered a method for achieving immortality through dimensional travel, and that the magician's death had been faked to cover his escape to another plane of existence. Sterling apparently believed that by studying Grimm's techniques and equipment, he could achieve the same transcendence. The article mentioned that several people had gone missing while working for Sterling, supposedly volunteers for his experiments. Sarah felt a chill as the full scope of Sterling's plan became clear. He hadn't just wanted to acquire Blackwood's cabinet. He had wanted to test its supernatural properties by making someone vanish permanently, presumably to study the process and refine his technique. Marcus Blackwood had been an unwitting test subject in Sterling's quest for immortality. But if the witness sightings were accurate, the experiment hadn't worked as Sterling intended. Instead of vanishing completely, Blackwood was apparently trapped in some kind of liminal state, partially existing in the normal world but unable to fully return. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting her research. "Detective Chen, this is Captain Morrison. We just got a break in your case. TSA flagged someone using Marcus Blackwood's credit card at JFK Airport. He's trying to board a flight to London." "I'm on my way." The drive to JFK took 45 minutes in heavy traffic. Sarah used the time to coordinate with airport security and immigration officials. If Marcus Blackwood was trying to leave the country, she needed to intercept him before he boarded any international flights. She found the TSA checkpoint supervisor waiting for her with surveillance footage. The man attempting to use Blackwood's credit card looked similar to the missing magician, but something was off about his appearance and behavior. "He's been standing at the same spot for 20 minutes, the supervisor explained, just staring at the departure board like he can't understand it. When our agents approached him, he seemed confused about where he was or where he was trying to go." Sarah studied the surveillance monitor. The man on screen definitely resembled Marcus Blackwood, but his movements were strange, jerky and unnatural, as if he was learning how to use his body. "Where is he now?" "Holding area near Gate 47. We're treating this as a medical emergency rather than a criminal matter per your instructions." Sarah made her way through the airport security maze to the holding area. Through the glass partition, she could see a figure sitting in a plastic chair, staring blankly at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. It was definitely Marcus Blackwood. But something fundamental had changed. His eyes held no recognition when she entered the room, and he seemed to struggle with basic concepts like language and spatial awareness. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Detective Chen, NYPD. Do you remember me?" Blackwood looked up at her with the expression of a child encountering something new and potentially frightening. When he spoke, his voice had an odd, hollow quality. "I know this place, but I don't know this place. The lights are too bright. Everything is too loud." "Do you remember the theater? The cabinet? What happened during your performance?" "Performance?" Blackwood tilted his head like a confused animal. "I was somewhere else, somewhere dark and quiet. There were others there. They tried to tell me things, but I couldn't understand their language." Sarah felt a mixture of pity and professional fascination. "Mr. Blackwood, what's the last thing you remember clearly?" Elena closing the doors, the darkness inside the cabinet, then falling through spaces that don't exist, and voices, always voices, trying to explain things I couldn't comprehend. "How did you get here?" "To the airport." Blackwood stared at his hands again. "I found myself in a place with many people and lights. Someone gave me plastic rectangles and told me to come here, but I don't remember who or why." Sarah realized that Marcus Blackwood's consciousness had been fundamentally altered by his experience in whatever dimension the cabinet accessed. He was alive, but damaged in ways that might be permanent. "Mr. Blackwood, do you remember someone named David Sterling?" At the mention of the name, Blackwood's expression changed dramatically. Fear and anger flickered across his features. "Sterling, yes. He came to see me in the dark place. He wanted to learn how to stay there, how to become like the others. But the others didn't want him. They sent me back instead." "What others?" "The ones who went before. Theodore's assistants. They're still there in the spaces between. They've been waiting so long they've forgotten how to be human." Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The Victorian assistants who had vanished during Grimm's performances weren't dead. They were trapped in whatever dimension the cabinet accessed, unable to return. And David Sterling knew this. "Did Sterling follow you back?" Blackwood shuddered. "He tried, but the others wouldn't let him pass. They said he didn't belong in either world. So they changed him." "Changed him how?" "Made him like them. Not alive, not dead. Trapped between spaces." Sarah realized that Sterling's plan had backfired catastrophically. Instead of achieving immortality, he had trapped himself in the same liminal existence that had claimed Grimm's assistance. But that raised another question. If Sterling was trapped, who had given Blackwood the credit cards and travel documents? Mr. Blackwood, who told you to come to the airport? The woman. She said she worked for Sterling, that she needed to get me away from here before the others found out I had returned. Sarah felt a chill. What woman? Young, dark hair. She said her name was Elena. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Elena Vasquez hadn't been an innocent assistant caught up in Sterling's plot. She had been working with him from the beginning. Sarah called for medical assistance for Blackwood, then immediately contacted the precinct to issue a BOLO for Elena Vasquez. The woman had played her role perfectly, appearing to be a loyal assistant while actually helping Sterling orchestrate Blackwood's disappearance. But why was she now helping Blackwood escape? Had she genuinely been unaware of Sterling's true intentions? Or was this part of some larger plan? Sarah's phone rang as she was coordinating Blackwood's medical evaluation. Detective Chen. This is Officer Rodriguez. We found Elena Vasquez, but there's a problem. She's at Mount Sinai Hospital. Been in a coma since yesterday morning. Apparent drug overdose. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Since yesterday morning, that's impossible. I interviewed her yesterday evening, and again this morning. Doctor says she was brought in around 9 a.m. yesterday with severe barbiturate poisoning. She's been unconscious ever since. Sarah realized she'd been speaking to someone else entirely. Someone who looked like Elena and knew enough about the case to answer questions convincingly. But if the real Elena was in a coma, who had she been talking to? She rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital, her mind racing through the implications. Someone had been impersonating Elena Vasquez, feeding her false information about the case, while the real Elena lay unconscious in a hospital bed. At the hospital, Sarah found the real Elena in the ICU, pale and still, surrounded by monitoring equipment. The attending physician confirmed that she had been comatose since Tuesday morning, hours before Marcus Blackwood's performance. Was this a suicide attempt? Sarah asked. We don't think so. The drug levels suggest she was poisoned deliberately. Someone wanted her unconscious, but not dead. Sarah studied Elena's face, comparing it to her memory of the woman she had been interviewing. The resemblance was remarkable, but now that she looked closely, there were subtle differences in bone structure and facial features. Someone had undergone extensive plastic surgery to resemble Elena Vasquez, then used that resemblance to infiltrate the investigation and misdirect Sarah's efforts. But who? And why go to such elaborate lengths? Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Detective Chen, if you want to understand what's really happening, meet me at the Blackwood Theater at midnight. Come alone. A friend. Sarah stared at the message. Every instinct told her it was a trap, but it might also be her only chance to uncover the truth behind the elaborate deception. She decided to meet the mysterious contact, but not alone. She arranged for backup officers to surround the theater, positioned where they could respond quickly if needed. The Blackwood Theater was dark when Sarah arrived at 11:55 p.m. She used her key to enter through the front door, drawing her weapon as she stepped into the familiar space. The ghost light was burning center stage, casting long shadows across the empty seats. "I'm here," she called out. "Show yourself." A figure stepped out from the wings, a woman who looked exactly like Elena Vasquez, but moved with predatory grace that the real Elena had never possessed. "Detective Chen, thank you for coming." "Who are you?" The woman smiled, and in that expression, Sarah saw something cold and calculating that had been carefully hidden during their previous encounters. "My name is Diana Sterling. David Sterling was my brother." Sarah kept her weapon trained on the woman. "So this was all revenge? Your brother got himself trapped, and you blame Marcus Blackwood?" "Not revenge, Detective. Completion. David's work wasn't finished when he became trapped in the dimensional space. He discovered something extraordinary in that place. The secret Theodore Grimm had been trying to perfect for decades, which is true immortality. Not just extending life, but transcending physical existence entirely. David found a way to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, to become something greater than human. Sarah felt a chill. "And you want to follow him?" "I want to perfect the process he started." David's mistake was underestimating the consciousness of those trapped in the dimensional space. They resisted his presence, fought his attempts to control the environment. But I've learned from his experience. By impersonating Elena and manipulating the investigation. Diana nodded. "I needed to understand exactly how the cabinet worked, how the safety modifications affected the dimensional transfer process, and I needed someone with the right resonance to serve as a conduit." Marcus Blackwood. Blackwood was perfect. His consciousness had been partially separated from his physical form by the dimensional travel. He could serve as a bridge between worlds, allowing me to establish communication with David and the others trapped in the space. Sarah realized the full scope of Diana's plan. "You've been using Blackwood as some kind of supernatural telephone. More than that, I've been learning from him, understanding how consciousness can be separated from physical form while maintaining coherence. With that knowledge, I can perfect the dimensional transfer process." "And then what? You disappear into your brother's otherworldly paradise?" Diana's expression grew rapturous. "Detective, imagine existence without the limitations of physical form, without aging or death, with access to knowledge and experiences across multiple dimensions. David and the others have found something incredible. Or they've found a very sophisticated form of hell," Sarah countered. Blackwood seemed terrified of his experience. "Blackwood lacks vision. He clings to his human limitations. But I've prepared myself for transcendence." Diana pulled out a device that looked like a modified remote control. "This will activate the cabinet's supernatural properties without requiring someone to physically enter it. I can initiate the dimensional transfer from anywhere in the theater." Sarah realized that Diana planned to use the cabinet to join her brother in the dimensional space. But first, she needed to eliminate any witnesses to her elaborate deception. "You're not just planning to disappear, are you? You're planning to make sure no one can follow you or bring you back. The cabinet will be destroyed in the process, yes. It's the only way to ensure the dimensional gateway remains permanently open. David and I will finally be together in a realm beyond human understanding." Sarah tensed, ready to act. But before she could move, Diana pressed a button on her device. The cabinet began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. The air in the theater grew thick and oppressive, and Sarah could hear sounds that seemed to come from impossibly far away. Whispers in languages she couldn't identify. "You can't stop this, Detective. The process has already begun." Sarah dove behind a row of seats as the cabinet's supernatural energies began to affect the physical environment. Light fixtures flickered and sparked, and the temperature dropped rapidly. From her cover, she could see Diana standing calmly center stage. apparently unaffected by the chaotic energies swirling around the cabinet. The woman's appearance began to shimmer and blur, as if she was becoming less solid. "Diana," Sarah called out. "Whatever your brother found in that place, it's not paradise. It's a prison. Blackwood told me the others have forgotten how to be human. Is that what you want?" "Humanity is a limitation, Detective. David has transcended those boundaries." But as Diana spoke, Sarah noticed something in her voice, a tremor of doubt, or perhaps fear. The cabinet's glow intensified, and suddenly, figures began to materialize around it. Translucent, shifting forms that might once have been human, but now appeared as wraiths made of shadow and starlight. One of the figures was clearly David Sterling, but the man was barely recognizable. His form flickered between dimensions, sometimes solid, sometimes ethereal, always seeming to be in pain. "Diana," David's voice echoed strangely, as if coming from a great distance. "Don't do this. The others, they won't let you leave. They need someone to blame for their imprisonment." Diana's confidence wavered. "David? You said this place was paradise." "I lied. I needed you to complete the research, to find a way to bring me back. But there is no way back, Diana. Once you cross over, you become like us, trapped between worlds, neither alive nor dead." The other figures began to move toward Diana, with obvious malevolent intent. Sarah realized these were Theodore Grimm's missing assistants, and they had spent over a century building their resentment toward anyone who had used the cabinet to access their prison. "Diana, shut it down," Sarah called out, "before it's too late." But Diana seemed paralyzed by the revelation that her brother had been manipulating her, just as she had manipulated others. The device slipped from her numb fingers and clattered across the stage floor. Sarah sprinted from her hiding place, diving for the device as the supernatural energies in the theater reached a crescendo. The cabinet was beginning to crack and splinter, unable to contain the dimensional forces flowing through it. She grabbed the device and frantically pressed buttons, trying to reverse whatever process Diana had initiated. The wraith-like figures were almost upon Diana now, their forms becoming more solid and threatening. Finally, Sarah found what appeared to be an emergency stop function. She pressed it, and the cabinet's glow immediately began to fade. The wraiths flickered and became translucent again, their grasping hands unable to maintain purchase in the physical world. David Sterling's form began to fade as well. "Thank you, Detective. Maybe now we can finally rest." As the supernatural energies dissipated, Diana collapsed to the stage floor, unconscious but breathing. The cabinet stood dark and silent once more, but Sarah could see that its wood was now marked with deep cracks and scorch marks. The backup officers rushed into the theater as Sarah secured the scene. Diana Sterling would face charges for fraud, kidnapping, and identity theft, though explaining the supernatural elements of the case in court would be challenging. Marcus Blackwood was receiving treatment for his psychological trauma, though doctors weren't sure how much of his original personality could be recovered. The real Elena Vasquez was expected to make a full recovery from her poisoning. As for the cabinet itself, Sarah arranged for it to be stored in the NYPD's evidence facility, with strict instructions that it never be used again. Some mysteries were better left unsolved. 3 weeks later, Sarah was finishing her case report when she received an unexpected phone call. "Detective Chen, this is Marcus Blackwood." Sarah was surprised to hear him speaking so clearly. "Mr. Blackwood, how are you feeling?" "Better. Much better, actually. The doctors say I'm making remarkable progress. But that's not why I'm calling. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For stopping Diana Sterling. I can still sense the dimensional space sometimes, and I know what would have happened if she had completed her plan. Those trapped souls would have been able to access our world directly. It would have been catastrophic. I'm just glad everyone's safe. Detective, there's something else. The cabinet, it needs to be destroyed. As long as it exists, there's a risk someone else might try to use it. The dimensional barriers are weakening. Sarah made a note to follow up with the evidence department. I'll see what can be arranged. Thank you. And, Detective, if you ever encounter other objects like Grimm's cabinet, be very careful. There are things in those dimensional spaces that should remain imprisoned. Sarah hung up the phone and stared out her office window at the bustling streets of Manhattan. Somewhere in the city, there were probably other supernatural artifacts, other doorways to dimensions that humans weren't meant to explore. She made a mental note to be very suspicious of any future cases involving magic tricks, vanishing acts, or mysterious collectors with European accents. Some doors, Sarah reflected, were meant to stay closed. The Blackwood Theater remained empty for months after the case was closed. Local real estate agents found it difficult to rent the space. Potential tenants complained about cold spots, strange whispers, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. Eventually, the building was purchased by a consortium of paranormal researchers who planned to study the residual supernatural energies that lingered in the space. Sarah wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but it wasn't her jurisdiction anymore. Late at night, when she drove past the old theater, Sarah sometimes saw lights flickering in the windows and wondered if the dimensional barriers had been permanently weakened by Diana Sterling's experiment. She never stopped to investigate. Some mysteries were best left to others. The case file on Marcus Blackwood's disappearance was officially closed, marked as solved by arrest. The supernatural elements were omitted from the official report, noted only in Sarah's private files as unexplained phenomena requiring further investigation. Sarah kept those files locked in her desk drawer, along with a growing collection of similar cases, disappearances, and strange incidents that defied conventional explanation. She had learned that New York City held more mysteries than most people could imagine, and that sometimes the most important job of a detective wasn't solving crimes, but knowing when to leave well enough alone. The vanishing cabinet itself was quietly destroyed in a controlled demolition, its ashes scattered in undisclosed locations to prevent anyone from reconstructing it. Sarah attended the destruction personally, wanting to ensure that particular doorway between worlds was permanently sealed. As the last pieces of Theodore Grimm's supernatural masterpiece crumbled to dust, Sarah felt a sense of closure. The case had challenged everything she thought she knew about reality, but it had also taught her valuable lessons about the dangers of pursuing knowledge without wisdom. Some magic, she had learned, was better left as mystery. In the months that followed, Sarah found herself paying closer attention to the strange undercurrents that flowed beneath New York's everyday bustle. She developed a network of contacts among antiquarians, occult scholars, and paranormal investigators, people who could alert her to potentially dangerous supernatural artifacts before they fell into the wrong hands. The city was full of wonders and terrors that most people never suspected, and Sarah had appointed herself as an unofficial guardian against those who would exploit such mysteries for selfish gain. It wasn't the career path she had envisioned when she joined the NYPD, but it was the one that circumstances had chosen for her. And in her quieter moments, Sarah had to admit that she found this hidden world of supernatural crime far more engaging than ordinary detective work. After all, anyone could solve a mundane murder or robbery. But it took a special kind of detective to unravel the mysteries that lurked in the shadows between worlds, to protect the innocent from dangers they couldn't comprehend, and to ensure that some doors remained forever closed. Sarah Chen had found her calling, and the city was safer for it. The end.